Hello, I'm so thrilled to be here with Jon Rosemberg. He is the author of a brand new book, A Guide to Thriving, the science behind breaking old patterns, reclaiming your agency, and finding meaning. Jon, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Louisa, for having me. It's such a joy to have a conversation with a fellow mapster.
Well, I think, we just came off of a fabulous weekend where we were able, where we studied in the master's program, in the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program. And I think that coming back and revisiting positive psychology every year, and we're now in our 20th year. And I think when I read your book, I think roadmap and compilation of what we have learned in positive psychology and how to integrate that into your life for higher levels of thriving. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love how you put that, Louisa. And I think for me, this journey really started, call it 7 years ago, when I started kind of taking notes of things in life that would help me thrive more. It eventually led me to the program that we both completed. And when I joined the program, I finally started seeing the science and the research behind it. So all of these things that I intuitively kind of was learning through my journey became very real the moment that I started studying what the researchers were saying, what the science was saying behind it. And I just felt like it was worthwhile to compile and put together all of these big ideas into a place where they were easy to reference. And I've also illustrated them with personal stories and stories about my clients uh, to hopefully make it more accessible to people who, like me, might have found themselves in this state of survival mode for a very long time, which is what led me to this whole process.
Yeah, and you talk about that quite a bit in your book, this idea of moving from survival to thriving. So can you share with us what do you mean by survival? What are the characteristics of when you're just surviving? And what are the characteristics of when you're thriving?
Yeah, so I would argue that survival mode is it can be a highly adaptive state when we're in danger, in physical danger. So survival mode is that hyper focus, that tension, that we feel in the jaw, in the chest, in the shoulders, the overthinking, the difficulty dealing with our emotions. That's what I would call survival mode. It's like, imagine calling 911 because there's an emergency going on. That would be like the most extreme way of survival mode. Uh, in contrast, I define thriving as that space where we're calm and we're able to connect with other people and we're able to get really creative and we tap into our prefrontal cortex and we can navigate life um, in a more intentional way. So what I argue in the book, the main hypothesis is that we can use agency as a way of going from survival mode to thriving. And I define agency as the capacity to make intentional choices supported by the belief that those choices matter and actually have an impact on the world.
Yeah, I love that. And Jon, I'm finding these days that so many people are actually in survival mode. And I think by using your roadmap and like you say, by becoming active in being able to change where they're at and what their state is at, so that they can become more engaged and be in that thriving mode. Because I find that you can't really get out of survival when you're in survival, right? It's almost like you need to shift your mind, your body, you talk about the nine elements, it's a whole body approach, really. And I find that when I'm in survival, for example, if I really have a lot of anxiety about something, it's very hard for me to move into doing anything about it, because it kind of shuts you down, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it shuts you down purposefully. That's the intention, right? Our bodies and our minds are designed to focus our entire attention on the threat that's in front of us. Now, what I propose in the book is that, so after reading a lot about how to go from survival mode to thriving and combining it with my personal experience and my experience working with clients, what I realized is that there were three common threats, and I summarized them in an acronym: AIR. A stands for awareness, I stands for inquiry, and R starts for reframing. So what I'm suggesting is that if we can bring some awareness, so let's define awareness. And actually, I'm going to give an example here. And for folks who might be listening and not watching, I'll try and describe it as best as I can. But I have this Rubik's Cube. My son broke his arm earlier this summer,
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
he went to summer camp and he couldn't jump in the lake. So he ended up becoming really, really good at solving Rubik's Cube. So when we are facing difficult thoughts or emotions or sensations in our body, it feels like the Rubik's Cube is really, really close to our eyes. So all you can see is one color. Imagine that color being red or green or whatever it is. You can only see that color. Awareness allows us to bring the Rubik's Cube a little bit further, to create some distance from that experience and bring it a little bit further from our face. So now we can notice, oh, there's multiple colors and multiple squares here, right? Inquiry, which is the second step in AIR, allows us to start playing with it and looking at all the different sides, or even moving it around and seeing all the different colors that exist in the Rubik's Cube and understanding how it works. And then reframing is what allows us to find the combination within that Rubik's Cube that will work for us in that moment. And that may be solving the Rubik's Cube for some people. For other people, it would be, a different type of solution. But what I'm suggesting is that if we can go through those steps, awareness, inquiry, and reframe, AIR, we can go from that survival mode state to thriving. And it's a practice. I would say it's not,
Right.
it sounds deceptively simple, the three steps, but as most of us know, just having awareness of what's happening in the present moment requires a tremendous amount of practice and a tremendous amount of effort. And I think this
Yeah.
practice of AIR has worked really well for me and for many of my clients. And I think it can be really helpful for other folks who are in similar situations.
Yeah. And I like how you used that air model as well with all of the 9 elements in your map as well. So let's talk about some of these. Let's talk about the number one, and I guess central. And when I take a look at your diagram with with regards to the map, beliefs is really at the center. So can you tell us more about that first element of beliefs and why it's so important and why it's at the center of your model?
Yeah. So what research is telling us, and Jerk Clifton, who's a classmate of ours, and he's doing incredible research at UPenn. What research is telling us that beliefs are a lens with which we look at the world. Our beliefs serves, it's kind of like wearing these glasses, and depending on the color of the glasses that you're wearing, you're going to see different situations or similar situations in different ways, right? So I believe, for example, I believe that I'm a terrible public speaker, right? Before you're going on stage, when you get the sweaty palms and the nervousness, which probably all of us get, right? Somebody who believes they're a terrible public speaker says, oh, this is telling me I shouldn't be doing this. I should walk away. I should run away. I shouldn't confront the current sensations that I have in my body and just not do it. If you have a belief that, maybe I'm not a great public speaker, but I can learn. This is a skill set that I need to learn. And in order to learn, I need to practice. And in order to practice, I need to be up on stage and screw up and do things right or do things wrong. If you shift the belief, then the sensations that come with that belief are giving you a different signal, right? So you can use that
Right.
to propel you into doing difficult things and into facing those fears. But in order to change a belief, the first thing that we need to do is be aware of it. We need to name it. We say, okay, there's a belief here. The
Right.
belief is that I'm a terrible speaker. What's a different belief that might serve me better here? And by the way I'm describing it sounds really simple. We hold on to these beliefs for dear life, right? This is how we navigate the world. They're incredibly
Exactly.
important. They're scaffolding for how we live our lives. So questioning, first of all, shining a light on those beliefs, and second, questioning them, inquiring into them, can be quite challenging for many of us. I know it has been for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think that beliefs are so important. And I think too that they're limiting, but how does unless you are, if you're not, most people I think are not aware of their beliefs and they don't understand that it's actually their beliefs that are limiting their ability to move forward on a lot of things. So what are some of the things you do to, or what are some of the things people can do to raise more awareness around what their beliefs might be? Because, in the AIR model, it's awareness first, because if you're not even aware, you can't really move on to do the inquiry or the reframing. So, what are some of the tools people could use even just to become more aware of what their beliefs are?
Yeah, what a great question. I think for me, and for every person is going to be different. Let's first acknowledge that we all have different ways of doing this. For me, working with a coach, working with somebody who can ask me questions and who can help me explore has been really helpful. Um, I know some folks who love journaling, and journaling can be a really powerful way to explore beliefs. Even writing short stories, any form of creativity, usually where we're tapping into that prefrontal cortex, into what we're tapping into our executive center, can be a really, really helpful way to create some awareness. Meditation works really well. So all of these practices that bring us into the present moment or into a state of flow can be ways in which we can start bringing awareness to those beliefs.
Right. I like that. One of the things that I do is if I'm not moving towards something that I know I need to move towards, I'm procrastinating, I'm hesitating, I know I need to do it, but I'm hesitating to do it. That's my signal. That's my thing where I go, okay, hold on, hold on. What's happening here? Why am I not moving forward with this? Let's take a look. What are some of the beliefs? And then when I explore what the beliefs are, I say, oh my gosh, okay, then how can I change the situation in order for me to have a different belief around this and and move forward with it anyway. So I find that's kind of my trigger to change beliefs. But so once you figure out your beliefs and then you have some inquiry around it with regards to, I wrote some notes, like where does it come from? How is it serving me right now, to have this belief, how could I change? And then I really like the reframing piece of it, which is, much more empowering of, okay, great, now I can do something different moving forward. How do you think this, you talk about the nine elements, we've got them all here, beliefs is just one of them, and that's really core to the, the whole map. But thoughts and emotions, so our cognitions, our emotions, our sensations in our body, our um transcendence, and then you've got past, present, and future in there, and everything. I love how everything comes together in the book, Jon, how you bring all of these elements together to really improve mental health. It's about mental health and resilience and thriving. What was your thought when you put together the nine elements? Why those nine elements, Jon?
Yeah. So first, I want to pick up Louisa, on something that you said that I think was really powerful. This idea of seeing your trigger when you're procrastinating, I think that's really powerful. And I think we often see triggers as this negative things. It's become so popularized in social media, and somebody's like, oh, I'm so triggered. I'm so triggered. Um, I have a friend who's a psychiatrist. His name is Reed Robinson, and he says triggers are friends to follow, which I love, because once you have a
Oh,
trigger, the
mm,
trigger is trying to give you information about a belief that may be running you on autopilot, right? So being
yeah,
able to notice that trigger is a really powerful form of awareness. And then getting really curious about it, which can be really hard, right? Because when we're triggered, we're not feeling great, right?
no,
But
no,
as you get curious about it, the next time you feel the trigger, it might be a little bit less intense. And then the next time, a little bit less intense. So I think it's a slow process. We often want to think about coaching or therapy or counseling or all of these modalities as, I'm going to go and I'm going to have this big breakthrough and my life is going to change. And what I have experienced is that it's a bunch of little tiny changes. It's the same as in finance, right? You get 1%, 2%, 3%, 5% interest, but over time there's a cumulative impact that because you're building upon what you're building, and that offers a tremendous amount of growth. So I think that idea of compounding can be really powerful in personal growth as well as financial growth.
yeah,
So let me go back to your question about the 9 elements. I grew up. My mom is a behavior therapist, staunch behavior therapist. She studied with Joseph Wolpe, which was one of the pioneers and she's a clinical psychologist. So when I grew up, it was behavior first, right? If you change your behavior, everything else will come. And
mm,
I think that's a really powerful idea. And I think it's limited and flawed. So part of my journey of individuation as a human being and of exploration as a student was, this can't be the answer. It can't just be, if I force myself to do XYZ, then suddenly my life is going to be great. So I started looking for other things. And then, CBT came in and brought in the thoughts, right? It wasn't just about behavior, but it was behavior and cognition. And I was, oh, that's fascinating. But there's more to that. There's the emotional life, right? And emotions manifest themselves as sensations in the body, right? So, okay, so now there's another element. And then I said, well, but what about spirituality? What about faith? What about connection to something larger than us? And in research, most spiritualities referred to as transcendence. I wouldn't say they're the same thing, but their transcendence is like the operationalization of spirituality in my view. So I was like, okay, so we have to bring spirituality. So all of that offered kind of like this present view moment of the human experience. But then I started wondering, well, but what about the experiences that we've had in the past? Do those matter? And of course, as you start, I mean, psychodynamics and all of these different other forms of therapy, some of them evidence-based, some of them a little bit less evidence-based, but there's certainly some usefulness to all of these different schools of psychology. So how does the past define the person that we are today? And there's conditionings that occur, right, early in childhood, and how do those conditionings kind of have an impact? And then the future, I know, well, you and I both know Marty Seligman and how big he is on prospection and this idea of
yeah,
hope and optimism, which is future mindedness. So that was also important.
yeah,
And then the final element, which is space, is the spaces which we inhabit. What does our environment look like? And I was very pleasantly surprised to hear Angela Duckworth this weekend talking about
same.
situational agency, which is this idea of how can we impact the spaces that we inhabit? How can we impact the people we interact with? She was giving the example of Michael Phelps and how he moved to a different place to find the right pool and the right coaching staff and the right food and the right hours of the day and whatever else he needed to do in order to be at the top of his performance. um,
Yeah,
Now, so that's kind of how all these elements came together. The more I started reading and learning about this, the more I discover there's layers here that we might be missing.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because, people often ask me, well, how did you take positive psychology to move you towards thriving? Because I really feel like there was Louisa before MAP and then a MAP Master of Applied Positive Psychology degree. And there was Louisa before MAP and Louisa after MAP. And I say, well, yeah, I incorporated positive psychology. And people say, oh, yeah, mindfulness. They'll pick one thing. And we learned like 1,000 things that you can do, literally, maybe more than 1,000 things that you could be doing. Yes, I agree with you in the sense that it's all just little. I changed my decision making. I changed my beliefs, and how to change those beliefs and cognitions, with thinking traps. And you talk about all of this in the book. And also, how is my past incorporated? So it's all of those little, 100 little tiny things that become part of your daily way of showing up in the world. That's how thriving happens. And I think the map is really going to help people one by one with all the 9 elements that you have on the map. I think that's really going to give people, and I like the way you call it a map because it is a road map. It is a practice, as you say, to having more thriving in your life. So, um, maybe we can end there, Jon. And I'm just going to say to people that if they're stuck or you're feeling like you want to have more thriving, the book is definitely a great resource that is, and it is science backed. I love all of the your research and your thoughts. Is very thoughtful with regards to the scientific rigor of what you've put in the book. There's a lot of research and science there for everybody, but it's kind of science with your practical application. Actually, maybe I do have one more question, Jon, if you don't mind. Um, how would you apply this within an organization? Because at the Canadian Positive Psychology Association, we're doing the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Awards, and I'm just curious, how would you take this into an organization?
Yes. So I would say there's the indirect path and the direct path. The indirect is as leaders start practicing air and leaning into their own agency, I believe that creates a ripple effect. I tell a lot of stories about my clients, all of them who are organizational leaders, right? From CEOs to entrepreneurs to lawyers and professionals, that as they start shifting their own beliefs and the way they navigate the world, this has a ripple effect into their community, which includes their workplaces, their clients, and everything else. So the work that we do on ourselves spreads out, especially, well, we know this, leaders bring the weather, right? So if you are in a place
Yeah,
where you're bringing awareness, inquiry, and reframe to your own life, other people will take a cue from that. So that would be the more indirect way. The more direct way is to actually put these ideas into practice. So if you're in a meeting and the meeting is getting tense, can you pause and say, "Hey, let's try and bring some awareness to what's happening here." It's worked really well for me to say, "Hey, emotions are heating up.
yeah,
I'm feeling angry, right? I'm feeling anger here. Heat is rising. I'm clearly
yeah,
feeling
yeah, yeah,
threatened, right? So can we take a pause and just
yeah,
figure out what's going on here? Or can we take a pause and pick it up later once we've all kind of been able to? So this idea of bringing awareness and then getting really curious. Okay, what happened there? What heated up the
yeah,
room? Why was this meeting so heated? What went on, and what's the stories that we're telling ourselves, and how's my story different from yours, right? And then the reframing usually in organizations is ultimately we all want to row in the same direction, right? We're trying to serve our customers, or we're
yeah,
trying to drive growth. So it can be really powerful to take this application of air and put it into a team setting and it works. So that's another way in which you can
Love
take
it.
the ideas from the book. Although the book is written with the individual in mind, I believe that once we learn and we practice these skills, they translate very often to larger groups.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. And thank you for writing this important book, and good luck with the launch, and we're here to support you. It's really an important message for the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Luisa. I appreciate the space.